legally separated parents, and you can have adult parents. What makes each one of these different is the fact that not only are there legal requirements for you to be legally separated, there are also like certain provisions where you can have an annulment. High conflict married homes don't necessarily have to conform with these provisions.
Oh, I see. So, how does this dysfunctionality affect your own emotional well-being? Parang close tayo.
Thank you for that question. So funny. Well, personally, I am not that affected by the high conflict situation in my home because I was raised to be independent all throughout my life. So because of that, I've been trained to be driven. And when all of this noise is going on, I usually just channel them out and I pretend that they're just in the background, but not necessarily interfering with my work ethic and everything. Sup, guest? Thank you for that. Okay.
Yes, that's very good. It's Cang. No, because based on my studies, children of divorce or dysfunctional families tend to experience a lot of both physical and emotional problems, such as low self-esteem, and they have greater anxiety. That's why you'd see a lot of children turning towards flunking out of school, doing vices. So it's good to see that not all children of divorce experience that.
Very interesting how the normal context would normally point to it being to it really affecting the emotional well-being of the individual, but for your case it's different. So how exactly do you get to channel these dysfunctionalities to actually motivate you in some other things? So what specific things do you do so that you end up performing that much better?
What I usually do is I don't let all of that emotional things affect me in a way that it would interfere with my studies and my relationships with other people. But then what I try to do is every time I feel the stress from the dysfunctionality of my home, I confide in someone I trust so that I may release the pressure and at the same time get some insights from them.
Okay, so I think at this point we're able to have two perspectives. One perspective where it seems as though dysfunctionality within the household doesn't seem to have that much of an impact on someone's life, or if ever uses these kinds of things in a very optimistic light. And you also have another perspective that focuses on the aspect of having high conflict homes being really to have a very negative impact on an individual. So before we move on to the next segment of our talk show, which is on asking the question on what is better between a high conflict married house or a low conflict divorced home. So before we go there, we will be presenting an advertisement by your sponsor. You're related to no, you're not. Sorry. So we're going to present an advertisement of a donut store who's sponsoring our talk show.
How all marriages in the world? Because they're not eating the donut. Don't get the reward, get the donut. Cinnamon sweet, cinnamon beer, strawberry muffin, croissant, glaze, sweet glaze, donut, rainbow, sprinkle. Baby, I love it, but it's hot donut. Get the donut.
I told my wife.
See, you married, has a holiday, feeling the little donut. Don't get involved.
Anyway, going back to our topic. So we are back to discussing then the main meat of our talk show, which talks about the question on what's actually better between a high conflict married home and comparing it to a low conflict divorce home. So before we really go there and discuss that question itself, let's first talk about the perspective of both sides on the question of whether there should be a divorce law in the Philippines or not. So, Ms. Cang.
Okay. So, personally, I believe that it would be better if the Philippines were to have a divorce law because it prevents children from high conflict homes, prevents them from living their lives under these high conflicts and possibly affecting their emotional, psychological, and mental health. Although we have the annulments here in the Philippines, there are certain conditions in which you're allowed to file for an annulment, but then I don't think those conditions are enough because they're very conservative and at the same time not only is it costly, but the chances of your particular issues would not really fall under those conditions that would allow you to have an annulment. So I think a divorce law could make the provisions and the conditions at which you can separate from your spouse and protect your children from these high conflict homes would be the solution to these issues.
Okay. So how about you, Dr. Well, based on your experience of getting divorced so many times already, I'm assuming in a different country, what's your insight on whether there should be a divorce in the Philippines?
Yes, different country because it's not allowed here. So, from based on a lot of studies, it showed that high conflict homes, which are found in countries without a divorce law, and families of divorce, tend to have the same effects on the children, right? We would think that maybe having a divorce wherein the children would not experience high conflict amongst their parents would be better, but in turn it is not. I would also like to add to the fact that divorce actually leads to a lot of families with only single mothers. And as we know, if a mother is the only one taking care of her family, she has to work twice as hard, she won't have as much time for her children, and we know that without much supervision, then the children won't be guided and molded as well as they should be.
It's very interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting. So, so I guess with the content of what has been discussed so far within this talk show, we have we kind of have a perspective of the pros and cons between legalizing divorce law in the Philippines or not. So before we, yeah, so as a conclusion, as inputted by as discussed by both perspectives, it can be seen that that having a divorce in the Philippines can go two ways. So, but the thing is, it will ultimately depend on how both partners are treated and how it ultimately affects their children. So since we also have another sponsor for our talk show, we will be presenting the other video message for our talk show. So to that end, we would like to thank our sponsor, Rejoice, for my beautiful hair today, and then and of course providing content to what we want to show with regard to our talk show, which is the implications of divorce, its positive effects, but of course even though it does have its positive effects, these should be exercised rather sparingly. And the presence of these kinds of laws should not be an excuse for people to engage in marriage that much more hastily. So with that, that's all for our talk show. Thank you so much for listening, and good night. Guys, Micah camping. But